All right, let's crank it up. Today, we are going deep into audio mixers. You sent in some really cool stuff from a technical guide, kind of like a cheat sheet, and we're going to use that to, well, to really break down how these things work.
It's going to be fun and important too. Think about it. Almost any audio you hear that sounds, really polished and pro, it's probably gone through a mixer.
So, starting point, right? What does a mixer actually do? Like, is it like a chef taking all these different sounds and making something
I
awesome?
like that, the chef thing. Yeah, it takes in signals, audio signals from mics, instruments, even pre-recorded tracks, and you can adjust them all, and then you blend them together into one cohesive mix.
So, more than just blending, though, right? We're actually messing with the sounds along the way.
100%. Mix can be a thing, the final song, like on Spotify, that's the mix. But to mix, the verb, that's the process, the artistry. That's where the magic happens, really.
Walk me through it. Let's say I'm in a band. How does our music actually get into the mixer, and then what?
Starts with those input jacks, right? You plug in your mics, instruments, whatever you've got. That audio is traveling as an electrical signal, like a language electronics use.
Oh, is that where analog versus digital comes in? Like different dialects of that audio
Just
language?
spot on. Analog's like a continuous wave, mirroring a sound wave directly. Digital converts it to ones and zeros, a coded version.
Wild. So analog or digital, this signal's flowing through the mixer, ready for its makeover. What happens next?
Now we bring in the toolkit. It's what lets us actually manipulate that audio like a sculptor with sonic clay.
Okay, tool by tool. What's like the first thing we can do to this sound?
Most basic one. Volume, plain and simple. You adjust the level of each sound coming in.
So like I could make the vocals louder than the drums or maybe turn down that one guitar that's always too loud.
Exactly. It's all about getting the right balance between everything in the mix.
Gotcha. What else is in this sonic toolbox?
Dynamics. This is where it gets a little trickier. Think of a song, quiet verses, then boom, huge chorus.
Yeah, you gotta crank it up to hear the quiet parts, then the chorus blows you away.
Dynamics processors smooth that out, makes it a better listening experience. They tame those super loud peaks, bring up the quieter parts so everything's more consistent.
Like evening out the roller coaster of the song.
Exactly. Now, for something technical and creative, EQ, equalization.
I've messed with E on like my music player, boosting the bass, making things brighter. Is it like that on a mixer too?
Similar, but way more in depth.
Yeah.
It's like you can boost or cut specific frequencies, which changes the tone of the sound, like a sculptor's chisel.
So I could make a muddy sounding bass cleaner or make a vocal really stand out.
You got it. Brighter, warmer, punchier, anything. It's all about getting each sound just right for the mix.
Wow. It's crazy how much you can control ECH sound. Anything else?
Panning. This is how we make it sound like the music's happening in a real space, like a
Mm,
stage. We can put each sound wherever we want, left, right, center.
like we're conducting the orchestra, but it's sound.
Exactly. It makes it more realistic. Plus, it keeps sounds from, clashing, fighting for the same sonic space.
Okay, so we've got volume, we've got dynamics, EQ, panning. That's already a lot to play with.
And we haven't even touched effects yet.
Yeah.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, so before we started, I was thinking about, effects like those guitar pedals, but those seem so, like, self-contained. How do you get effects into a mix?
It's kind of like, imagine you've got this cool reverb you want to use on vocals, but not the whole vocal track, right? Just certain parts.
Right, like you want control over it. It's not like you're physically, I don't know, sprinkling reverb on there, right?
That's where sins and returns come in. Think of it as uh, sending a letter, your audio signal, to a specialist. They add their touch, in this case the effect, and send it back.
So we're making a copy of the signal, sending it to a separate processor just for that effect, and then it comes back to the mixer.
Exactly. That's your effects processor, and it can be like a physical thing hooked up or even virtual inside the computer.
Makes sense. So, like, is there a send knob on the mixer? Is that how you control how much signal goes to the effect?
Yeah. It's like choosing how much of that letter you want to share. Subtle reverb, just a little bit. Want it
Hmm.
to sound huge E, send more.
Finding the sweet spot, like with everything else we've talked about, what about getting it back into the mix? That's return, right?
Yep. You control how much of that affected signal gets mixed back with the original dry one, like how much you want to emphasize that special touch on the letter.
So you could have vocals that sound like normal up front, but then in the chorus, they get kind of washy with that reverb we sent out earlier.
Totally, and adds so much depth and dimension to the mix.
Man, it's like layers in a painting. You've got the basic sound, you shape it with EQ, panning, then add these touches of effects with sends and returns.
Great way to think about it. And there's something else cool with sends and returns. Parallel processing.
Okay, that sounds kind of techy. What's that mean?
It means you can have the original A and D, the affected signal, both at the same time in the mix.
So they're like running side by side, not one replacing the other.
Yeah, exactly. So like a distorted guitar, but you still hear the clean one underneath, both contributing in different ways.
Whoa, that opens up some possibilities, like so many layering options. I bet that was a game changer when it, came along.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of game changers, we got to talk about, well, the evolution of mixers themselves. Digital mixers.
Yeah, I keep hearing about those, like they're the future of mixing, but honestly, I still picture those big old analog ones with all the knobs and sliders.
I get it. There's something classic about those, right?
Mm-hmm.
But digital mixers,
Mm.
they can do things analog just can't in terms of like power and flexibility.
Okay, sell me on it. What are the big advantages of going digital?
One of the biggest is sound quality. Remember how we said analog signals can degrade as they, travel through stuff?
The sonic telephone idea, right? It loses a little fidelity along the way.
Exactly. Digital avoids that. It converts audio to data, ones and zeros, so it stays perfect, like a perfect copy every time.
Crystal clear audio from start to finish. I like that. What else?
Flexibility. Digital mixers are basically computers, right? So they can do so much more.
I'm all about options. Give me some examples. What can these digital wizards do?
For one, routing. You can send any signal anywhere, making super complex setups that would be impossible with analog.
Like a giant virtual patch day?
Yep. Plus, you can save your settings. Imagine loading up the perfect mix instantly. No need to adjust every single knob again.
Talk about a time saver. But wait, there's more, right? I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Right. Another one. Automation.
Automation. So in mixing, what's that mean?
Let's say you want the vocals to slowly get louder in the chorus or an effect to fade in.
Mm-hmm.
You can record those changes as you make them, and the mixer will do it automatically every time.
Like having a robot assistant perfectly executing those little moves? Amazing.
It really is. Digital gives you so much control, you wouldn't believe it.
So we went from volume knobs to like complex routing and automation. It seems like a whole other world. But are there any downsides?
Good question. It's powerful, but there is a learning curve. The menus, the interface, it can be a lot compared to a simple analog mixer.
So you trade like simplicity for power. It depends what you need, I guess.
Totally. It's about your workflow, your preferences, what the project calls for.
Man, what a journey. We started with the basics of sound, and now we're talking about like digital magic.
It really makes you wonder what's next. What's the future of this whole thing?
It's funny. Before we did this, I knew mixers were like a big deal, but I never really got how much they actually DO to all the sounds we hear. It's like I was missing half the story.
It is kind of like that, right? Enjoying a great meal, but not knowing anything about the recipe or the chef. Once you get it, you appreciate it so much more.
Totally. So, big picture, what do we learn about these audio mixers? We started with, like, the basics, right? The mixer takes in all these signals from mics, instruments.
Right, and then using all these different tools. You can change them. Volume, dynamics, like with compression. You shape the tone with EQ, even position the sounds with panning.
And we can't forget sends and returns. Routing audio out to those effects processors, then blending it back in, adds so much to the mix, literally.
And then, the whole digital revolution. Digital mixers, they're on another level. The sound quality, the features, it's crazy what they can do compared to even just a few years ago.
Blows my mind, honestly. But, going back to that chef thing, technology is only part of it, right? It's still the person, the audio engineer, who really makes the magic happen.
Oh, absolutely. The mixer's a tool, that's all. The engineer's ear, their creativity, how they understand music, that's what makes a mix great.
So why does all this matter to, like, the average person, someone who's never going to touch a mixer? Why should they care?
Think about it. Audio mixers are behind practically every sound we hear, every day. The musics, the podcasts, movies, even video games.
That's so true. We're swimming in audio constantly, and it's all been shaped by, someone at a mixer. So even if you don't use one, knowing how they work, it makes you appreciate all that sound so much more.
And who knows? Maybe this deep dive's sparked something for someone out there, made them want to try it themselves. There's so much info online now, software, even small mixers for home studios.
It's easier than ever to jump in. So to everyone listening, here's something to think about. Imagine you had all these tools, all this power to shape sound, blend instruments, create whatever you can imagine.
What kind of music would you make? What stories would you tell? The possibilities are huge. It all comes down to, well, your imagination. That's the only limit.
What a great way to wrap things up. Thanks for going on this deep dive with us into the world of audio mixers. We'll see you next time for another audio adventure.